Hey everybody, welcome back. It's another magical movie review with me, Magic by Molly. Today we're continuing our Disney Princess series with Disney's first Pixar princess, released in 2012, and her name is Merida. So this week we're reviewing Disney's Brave. I actually didn't watch this movie so it came out in 2012. I didn't watch it for the first time until maybe 2018, maybe 2019, like early last year. So it's been an interesting process to rewatch it because the first time I watched it, I actually really didn't enjoy it all that much. Not to say that I hated it, but I was just like, nah, it's fine. I mean, it's another Disney princess movie, whatever. But I actually enjoyed it a little bit more this time, and I went into it expecting to put this at the bottom of my movie ranking list so far of the Disney Princess series. Stick around to see where I actually ended up putting it. So if you've seen a magical movie review before, you know my general process. I break things down into a few sections. We start with a magical recap, give you guys a fast overview of the plot of the movie just to kind of catch you back up, and then we jump into magical moments, enchanting efforts, a VMP, very magical person. Then I do my movie rankings for you, and then we dive into what I call the nerd alert, or the origin story, kind of the background of how we got to this Disney princess film, or the Disney adaptation of this particular story. So we'll just dive right in. I didn't really do anything special for Merida this week. One, because I've been in quarantine and I don't have an opportunity to go out and look for looks that are very Merida themed. Not like any of my other ones have been like super themed anyway. I also had a few too many quarantinis last night, and so my head hurts and I had to put like a frozen roller on my face, so this is as good as it's gonna get. My eyes were too dry for contacts today, so really you're getting a preview of the world from my glasses because they're super reflective right now. So sorry, not sorry, like at all. So jumping right into the magical recap, giving you the quick plot really fast. Yes, I wrote it down. No, I did not practice. Young girl named Merida almost gets attacked by a bear in the woods. Dad fights it and loses a leg, determined to get revenge. Maybe like 10 years later, her mom is obsessing over her to be more ladylike, but all she wants to do is ride her horse and do archery. Her parents do this big ceremony for eligible suitors to win her hand in marriage, but Merida's not into it. She's just not ready. So she competes for her own hand in marriage and crushes the competition in an archery competition. Her mother is furious and wants her to choose a man anyway. Merida runs away, finds a witch in the woods who makes her a special brownie, tricks mom into eating it, which turns her into a bear. They go on some bear adventures and find out that they need to sew this thing back together before the second sunrise to turn her back into a human. They finally get what they need, but the other big old bear from the beginning of the movie, also under the witch's curse, we find out, tries to murder them all, but Mama Bear saves them. Then Merida saves her mom, then they all live happily ever after, and no one forces underage marriage. Lots of bear action. If you're into bears, this is the movie for you. I had a couple of magical moments from this film. I think we're taking it a step up on the animation. Of course, when Pixar gets involved in Disney princess movies, you know it's going to be magical anyway. I think even for 2012 especially, but even when I watched this movie for the first time last year, I thought Merida's hair and the animation of her hair was absolutely magical. Like, it ebbs and flows and it bounces as she walks. It's absolutely crazy, and it's giving me what I wanted from Tangled, which I didn't get last time, which was the protagonist is never the one that has the crazy, wild, like curly hair. It's always straight, sleek. If it is wavy or curly, it's still it's voluminous, but it's still very smooth, whereas Merida is like the complete opposite. It's super crazy. You can tell that she likes that about herself, which I absolutely love. I think for any girl with natural curly hair, or any girl that wants to pride themselves on their natural hair, like, this is a Disney princess that they can look up to. So I thought her hair was a magical moment throughout the film, but one of the moments that really like made me realize that she loved her hair so much was when her mom was getting her all dressed and ready for the introduction ceremony when all the other clans are getting there, and shoving all of her hair underneath that like cap essentially. She pulls out one strand of red hair because she wants her crazy curly hair to shine through, whereas her mom doesn't. Like, her mom wants the hair to be more tamed. That in itself is just an incredibly empowering moment to just accept you for who you are and accept like your hair for how crazy it may or may not be. In the same scene with the opening ceremony and the curly hair coming out, I think when the clans start fighting and the queen stands up and she just starts walking through towards the leaders and everybody's getting out of her way, I just realized that the queen is like a fucking boss. Like, nobody messes with her. She is ultimately the one making all the final decisions. She's pulling the strings. Like, she's definitely in charge of this whole situation. When Merida like wins her own hand in marriage and they're like stressed out trying to get her to choose somebody still, the king has nothing to do with this situation, which I also think is a magical moment, but we'll get to that. But like, they're waiting so long because mom is now a bear. Like, it's up to the queen to make the decision on like how the situation is gonna go. So like, she's the puppet master here, which I think is incredibly empowering for women as well, to be like, even though you're not the king, you still have an incredible amount of power in this situation as a woman in leadership here. So I really, really like that. So with the king as well, even though he holds the title as the king and he's ultimately the leader of the group, like, he is incredibly supportive of his wife, is gonna do role play to help her like practice how she's gonna talk to his daughter, like very caring, very like protective over his family. But he also just wants peace between them, which I think is really beautiful. So I think it's just a really great relationship that he has with Merida. I think because it's his firstborn and like daddy-daughter relationship, the kind of like that special bond there. But like, from the beginning, he got her a bow. He doesn't really care about gender norms. Like, he's my daughter, like, and everybody should know how to fight. Cracking jokes with her about the archery competition and how terrible they're doing. And I think he's just incredibly open to Merida not having to choose, but also wanting to respect tradition. Like, he seems very neutral in the whole situation, which is kind of frustrating to just like, you could make all this stop if you really wanted to. He's letting the women kind of duke it out, let them come to the decision that they want to come to, and I'll support whatever. Like, I think that that's a great concept that should be in most movies when it comes to male power. I also think, like, this isn't necessarily a magical moment within the movie itself, but like, the casting is amazing. I mean, you've got Kevin McKidd, Emma Thompson, Julie Walters, who's like my girl Molly Weasley from the Harry Potter films, Robbie Coltrane, who plays Hagrid, Craig Ferguson, who's just a boss, Kelly MacDonald, who does Merida. Like, it's just an incredible amount of star power in this movie that I didn't really realize until this go round when I was watching the film. Like, I was like, all these voices sound familiar, and of course then I started doing the research and I was like, oh my god, I love so many of these people. So that's another magical moment for me. It's not necessarily a particular moment in the film, but just knowing that some of my favorite actors and actresses are a part of this project is really, really cool. Another magical moment for me culturally, my dad's side of the family is Scottish, and so I grew up knowing a lot about Scottish heritage and our clan Fraser, if that means anything to anybody, our tartan, like all of that stuff. We went to the Highland Games. Just kind of watching it felt very special in that way, like the Scottish Highlands and just the culture around the whole thing was extremely fun for me to watch. One of the other things in a particular magical moment from the film that stuck out to me is going back to animation is when Merida is shooting for her own hand in marriage, which I think is Boss. The moment when she's drawing back her last arrow to shoot off, the animation of like the wobble of the bow and it hitting and the splinters flying, like I thought that that was incredibly beautiful, because it could have been so easy to just make it shoot straight, be done with it, because it's a cartoon, like we can make it whatever we want it to be and everybody's gonna buy into it. But the fact that they took the time to make it as realistic as they possibly could, to show the wobble and the wind and it cutting her face, like the reality of how hard it is to shoot archery and how skilled she actually is. Like it just adds to how incredibly talented she is as an athlete in this field. Because one, like archery is hard. I don't know if anybody else has tried, but it's not an easy thing to do. Even just for men, it's difficult. Added on top of that, for women, I've heard that women technically are a little bit more accurate of a shot. It's just like the power behind it is more difficult for women. That's speculation. If you know anything about archery, absolutely tell me if I'm wrong. I think it just adds to the scene itself of like, the shock and awe of this girl like standing up for herself and just declaring what she wants, not really asking anybody for permission. She just decides to do it. Like she's playing by the rules as the firstborn of her family. Like technically she gets to compete for her own hand in marriage. Like she's not breaking any rules, but it's like, of course it's a loophole. I loved that scene in particular. Now for enchanting efforts, these of course were things that just kind of stuck out to me as like, why would they do it that way? Or just big old question marks above my head. There was some questionable content, which is why this movie was rated a little bit higher. I think it's PG rather than G. So I'm not speaking to that because that's kind of hilarious on its own as an adult watching these films. One of the first things that just kind of like made me think was when the queen eats the cake or whatever it is that eventually will turn her into a bear. She gets sick, Merida puts her to bed. When she's in the bed, she's fully clothed and she's still wearing her crown, like to bed. And I don't know why, but I was like, why is she wearing her crown to bed? Like, out of all these things that are super realistic in the film as far as animation goes, like why are they gonna keep her crown on her head? Like is it just to show when she turns into the bear, like that's the indicator that that's the queen, like the bear is wearing the crown? I don't know. Like maybe that's it. Like why that? I mean, if the mom rolls over and then all of a sudden it's a bear, I'm gonna think it's the mom. Like there's not really too many other paths we could go down of possibility there. The other thing about the movie that I still don't understand is that, of course, Merida has 3 younger brothers and they're super naughty, they're doing their thing, they're definitely like the slapstick comedy relief. Why don't they talk? They literally do not say a single word the entire movie. Like they make noises and they make like facial expressions so you can kind of get like the underlying context of what they're saying or trying to express in the scene, but like they actually don't say anything. And I was just wondering like why that is. And I don't know if it's because I know sometimes twins or triplets like have their own language, or like siblings that are really close have their own language, but like they didn't even say anything to each other. So it's like, how are they communicating? How do they know that they want to steal all these biscuits from the nanny? I really want to know. Also, why did they make that nanny so busty? Like her boobs are flopping the entire time. Like anytime she's in the scene, it's like distracting how busty she is. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have made her busty. Disney, of course, needs to make more characters of all different shapes and sizes, and I'm glad that they did that part. But like, why is it so low cut for like this kid's movie? Like, and then the kid is literally diving in between her boobs to get the key. Like that's kind of where we're getting into that questionable humor here, which I think is funny as an adult watching it, but like if I had a kid watching this movie, I'd be like, oh, I hope they don't understand that. With all that being said, coming full circle, thinking about all the different characters in the movie, who did I pick as my VMP, or my very magical person? I decided to go with, again, the person that provided me the most entertainment, the most comedic reliefs, the person that I thought played the biggest part in the story. I think I'm gonna go with Fargus, which is Merida's dad. I think it's just incredibly important to have a character that's supporting the protagonist to be whoever they want to be. Like from the jump, he gave her her first bow. He didn't pressure her at all throughout the film to, like, yes, he went along with the whole marriage ceremony thing, but that's because, like, that's what his wife wanted to do. Like, is very supportive of all the characters in the film, like the other clans, his family, the people that work there. Like, I just thought he was such an integral part of the story development in a low-key way. Like, without him, we wouldn't have any, like, it would just be like mom versus daughter, like, and the mom would just look like overbearing, which I think in the beginning she does, but then, like, you have those intimate moments with him, like, he kind of draws that out of each of the characters. Like, we don't get to see the softer side of the mom until, like, you have the one-on-one session with him and her in the bedroom doing the role play, and then having, like, the quick little one-on-ones with Merida and her dad, kind of like supporting her being the tomboy. Like, I think he just plays like such an important part of the film emotionally for all the characters, and I just think he's freaking hilarious. Like, he's making so many jokes about, like, what's under his kilt and his family, and I just think he's great. And the whole, like, bear revenge thing, like, is obsessive and also very funny. While I did enjoy this film much more this time around than I did the last time, it was definitely hard to place it in the list, in my movie ranking list. I'm keeping Beauty and the Beast at the top, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Mulan, Cinderella, Pocahontas, then Brave, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty. So this one's third from the bottom. I was, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was definitely expecting to put it last, because the first time I watched it, I just, like, really didn't get it. I don't know if it was because maybe I just wasn't in the mood to watch it that day, or maybe I was having a bad day. But I liked the movie. I would definitely watch it again, whereas before, like, I had no intention of really watching it again. And I liked the characters. I really like Merida as a Disney princess. I think she's crazy. I think she is stubborn and independent and a little bit wild, and while she has some struggles in the beginning, like, I thought really it was the mom in the wrong, but I think she's also in the wrong. Like, she has really great character development to realize what she has, and, like, the support system that she has always had. Like, it hasn't always been like her mom is out to get her. Like, her mom just wants to make sure that she's happy and wants to protect tradition and legends and all that stuff. So I think her as the princess is what pushed the movie up the list a little bit for me. And again, kind of looking at the list, the fact that it doesn't really have a soundtrack is another reason why, like, I'm pushing it down below. I don't think it needs a soundtrack. I think it's nice to not have a musical necessarily, and Pixar isn't going to do musicals, so I get it. But for me personally, in my movie rankings, as I've said almost every single magical movie review so far, the soundtrack is really the deciding factor at the end of the day, in a combination with the animation. there you have it. That's my magical movie review of the film itself. Now we're gonna dive into the nerd alert, which is where we dive into the origin story. Now, this one is definitely unique. This is an almost original story for Disney, for Pixar, and I think that's important for Pixar. They like to come up with kind of unique ideas. With that being said, something that I learned, and I'll share the resources that I pulled this from, because I actually found something out about Mulan in this process that I didn't before, and I think it was because Mulan has a much longer history and a specific point of origin, where Brave doesn't have like an old 16th, 17th century story that is derived from. So there's this author named Robert D. Sansucci. He wrote the book Fa Mulan, which was actually like an adaptation of the original stories that we've been seeing over time. That was actually like what Disney decided to remake into their Disney film. So it's not just like different stories that have been, I mean it is, it's a combination of different stories that have been played out over time, but that's the specific adaptation that they decided to recreate. So I learned that, but I also learned that he wrote a book titled Brave Margaret, which was the inspiration for Pixar's Brave. So it's still not an original story, if that makes any sense. It's still somebody else's story that Pixar and Disney's Pixar like picks up and makes into their own, but it's like, it's a relatively new story. Like, it was written in 1999, so we're not even going 20 years to recreate this project. So Brave Margaret, it's the kind of inspiration for this story, but it's not really like a direct adaptation, which I think is where like Pixar does a really great job of like putting their own spin and making it more of an original story. Margaret is like kind of the spinster lady who lives on her own. She's got a farm. She is struggling with kind of the mundane life of everyday farm life. And then this guy rides through her farmland in need of like shelter and food for him and his men. He's like a son of a king and he's leading an army. And she, of course, like agrees to take care of them in exchange for them bringing her along on their adventures. Like, of course, they say okay, because the story would be boring if they didn't say yes. So they're on this adventure. They go out to sea. There's this sea serpent, and I'm reading this because of course they didn't memorize it, and it's like, I'll let you pass if you give me Margaret, which the Simon guy, the son of the king, he's like, no, you can't have her, and he's like ready to fight. But Margaret's a logical lady. Like, she's like, I'm not gonna sacrifice all these people for my safety. I'll go. So she kind of like sneaks off the boat and rows out. Surprise twist, she actually fights the beast and kills it. But as she's killing the beast, it says sea serpent, but I think of like the Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean. I think of like the tentacle coming down and like it strands her boat, like throws it onto this island, and she gets stranded there. So then this part is where we're kind of seeing that Disney magic, or like the Disney details. So she finds this old woman, or a witch, and this woman has like a ring that's supposed to be a symbol of this champion. If the champion can wear the ring, then they can go up the mountain and slay the dragon and restore her home, like her island. Simon eventually finds Margaret, tries to rescue her, but the woman, or the witch, won't let Margaret go, thinking like, oh, Simon's gonna come up and like try to defeat this dragon monster thing. Which of course works. Simon comes up and he's like, this is where I start rolling my eyes like, oh my gosh, the damsel in distress story all over again. He tries on the ring, but it's actually too small, but he goes to fight the dragon anyway. Of course, he gets defeated and dies. So, surprise twist there. Like, I'm expecting him to defeat the dragon and save her, and they get married and happily ever after, but he actually ends up dying. And this is when Margaret realized like, oh, the champion doesn't necessarily have to be a man, because the ring was too small, so she tries on the ring, fits perfectly, then she goes up the mountain and fights the dragon. When she defeats the dragon, everything is restored. The woman kind of takes back her land. Everything goes back to normal for her, and also apparently it restores Simon. And then she essentially rescues Simon. They get married happily ever after. I think there's the underlying tones are being taken into like the Disney adaptation. Like, you don't need a man to save you. Like, you can be your own hero or your own champion. Merida shows us in the first like 20 minutes of the film, so it's not even anything we have to wait until the end of the movie for. But of course, like, she ends up doing the saving at the end again as well, but it's just with her mother. There's also some content to say that this is also an original story. Like, the Disney story is an original work by Brenda Chapman, who apparently was fired from the project, and it was picked up by Mark Andrews, and he just kind of like made some tweaks and essentially like fast-tracked the project, so he was really credited with like getting it up and running. And from that perspective, Chapman said that she created the story from the perspective of like the mother-daughter relationship, and like she kind of infused inspiration from her relationship with her daughter into the story, and kind of like there's probably a little bit of therapy with writing in general, but like especially this particular, her relationship with her daughter, it sounds like they might have had some familial disputes, and so she kind of plugged it into the story but made it a happy ending. Of course, we don't know if anything good or bad happened with her personal life, other than the fact that she got fired from the project. So that's probably not too happy of a memory on their end. So this one was all over the place when it comes to the origin story too. I found a couple other articles that had disputing arguments about even what century the Disney film was set in. There's some saying that it was placed in like 10th century, but some of the wardrobes were more like 16th century Scotland. So like the origin seems like it's just a little all over the place. So it was a little harder for me to research this one. So I took it just kind of at face value. But that's it. That's my magical movie review of Disney's Brave, released in 2012. Let me know in the comments below what you think, if there's anything that you liked, didn't like, magical moments, enchanting efforts of yours for the film. Of course, make sure you catch up on all of the other magical movie reviews. I hope you guys all enjoy your quarantine. Hopefully you have some time to get your personal projects done, whether it be movie related or not, and stay safe and stay healthy out there.